Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just gave a little bit of an off-season guide to what is going to happen over the next couple of months. It's going to be wild. I can absolutely promise you that. Whether you're talking about the portal or the changing in the revenue structure or anything like that, it's going to be off the chain and there's going to be a lot of different things happening, but just strap in and try to keep track of all of it. But at the end of the day, let's get into the way too early 2025 CFP tiers as I see it. Definitely very early to be doing this. I'm not arguing that by any means, but I like to give an idea of where I'm standing as of right now. Maybe it'll change by the end of spring, and then maybe it'll change again by the time the season comes around. But as I see it right now, these are the teams that I think are outright national title contenders, will absolutely be in the conversation for a national title. There are a couple more teams here. I just have 5 per page just to make it look a little bit better, but we'll start off with Texas. This is a no-brainer. There's no doubt about that. I think I fully expect the run game to be much better. I expect the defense to be one of the best in the country once again, and that edge rushing to be just terrifying next year. So I think as long as Arch Manning is who they think they are, they should be in this conversation. There's no doubt about that. If he misses the mark, frankly, they should still be around the CFP. I think the defense is too good, and I think that run game is really going to take a good step forward. So even if Arch Manning doesn't become this world-beating quarterback right away that everyone expects him to be, I don't think Texas is going to necessarily be a team that bottoms out. I think they're going to be more than fine because you fall back on that defense and it's going to be one of the very best in the country. I fully expect Texas to be in the national title conversation very deep into this season. And then Penn State, this is the one. I think everyone understands at this point that 2025 is the season that you deliver, or a lot of people ask questions, and James Franklin might be in a little bit of trouble over there. So if they don't compete for a title, something is badly wrong, and there's no doubt about that. Whether it's an injury that unfolded or there's a couple of different things that could happen, but the reality is, one way or another, if they don't deliver, James Franklin's in trouble. If they do deliver, then a new era at Penn State could be starting in 2025. Then you have Ohio State. They replace a lot of people, but let's be totally honest, it's Ohio State. I'm not going to question their ability to reload. I'm not going to question their ability to stay on top of the sport when it looks like they should be falling off it. They're going to be more than fine. They will be in the national title conversation deep into this season. Then you have Georgia. Georgia was not Georgia this year. I think everyone understands that. Did not run the ball very effectively. Was not the most forceful defensive line that you've ever seen. And now they're in a position where they go into 2025 with a new quarterback, upgraders at the pass catcher positions. I think they can get back up to the top. I think Kirby Smart's on a little bit of a mission to make sure that his team gets at least back into the conversation where people aren't talking about him every week like they survived by the skin of their teeth. They want to talk about like they're the most dominant team in the sport and they have all the ability in the world to get back up there. I mean, even in a down year, they won the SEC title. So how much can you really say about what they can do? They absolutely will be in the national title conversation. And then you do have Clemson. Clemson is a team that I just love. I think the quarterback is the perfect person to lead this team. The veteran talent all over the place is going to be great, but the young talent with Sammy Brown is going to be incredible to watch as well. So I think they're about as good of a roster as you're going to find in the country, and definitely will be a team that will be in this conversation. But Anthony had a little observation here. I just realized that as a college football fan, that winning the national championship is not as easy as you think it is. Yes, I do think that's a reality, Anthony. I think that's something that a lot of people do, just kind of by nature. You know, the ultimate thing is you're playing for that national title trophy. You want to win that trophy, and he hasn't been able to do that. So it's fair to put a little bit of criticism on him. There's also, Ohio State to overcome, and Michigan to overcome, and now Oregon to overcome, and then you got to win 4 games to get there. So I do think James Franklin's a fantastic coach. I think he's done incredible stuff at Penn State. I just think he's not quite to that upper echelon level, but I would argue it's as much to do with the talent level on his team comparative to the other big-time teams as it does with him, and it feels like they're getting a little bit closer in that realm. So maybe 2025 is the year. He definitely will have as much, maybe unnecessary, but as much pressure as he's ever had on him in 2025, that is for sure. I would also include Notre Dame and Oregon in this group as well. Obviously, Notre Dame is going to be so good on defense. Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Jordan Clark, Drake Bowen, Jaden Osbury, a million guys that are going to make some big-time plays. As long as the quarterback works out, whoever that ends up being, they'll be more than fine. And then Oregon, the trajectory just continues to go up. I have no problem believing that this defense is going to be a little bit better, that Dante Moore might take a little bit of lumps early in the season, but will be more than fine in the long run and could very well deliver them a national title. As for the CFP contenders, LSU is a team that I'm watching very closely. Garrett Nussmeier coming back, tons of playmakers, including the ones you brought in from the portal, tons of upgrades from the portal on the defensive side of the ball, and then they're better in just about every position that you could possibly want. Going into 2025, you just got to make sure that Brian Kelly comes through. You got to make sure that Garrett Nussmeier doesn't make as many mistakes, and you got to make sure that they make the plays that they need to. And Anthony, I have Miami right about here, and that's something that it really just comes down to Carson Beck. If he is healthy, I firmly believe they will be in this fight. I think the run game will be much better. I think the defense with Corey Heatherman coming in will at least be better. I don't know how much of a leap it will take, but at least be better and at least put them right around where they were this year. And I think Carson Beck's a quarterback that a lot of people will throw stones at throughout the offseason. A lot of people will have a lot of things to say about him. The reality is he can make a lot of plays, and he can make a ton of throws, and as long as you dial back some of the I have to be the guy that makes all of the plays in the world, you're going to be more than fine. And you're going to have an offense that is very, very good, maybe not this level or 2024 level, but at least around that level. And then the defense just has to take a step forward. So I fully expect Miami to be in this position this year, along with a couple other teams from the ACC, maybe an SMU or a Louisville. But we'll talk about Louisville actually here in a second. But then you do have Alabama. Kalen DeBoer in his second year at Alabama, one of the most talented teams in the country. No matter how you cut it, this team is absolutely loaded in every sense of the word. Ryan Williams, one of the best players in the country, and Ty Simpson just has to come along. You know, is it Ty Simpson? Is it Austin Mack? Is it maybe Keelan Russell comes in and takes that job, which is kind of what I'm hoping for, if I'm being totally honest. Love what Keelan Russell brings to that team, but overall, I think he's a guy that just has to be right, and that quarterback position has to be right, and if he's not, if they miss the mark again and they go 9-3, maybe even 8-4, what is the conversation around Tuscaloosa? How quickly is he probably pushed out the door? Because it'll get really interesting very quickly. I can promise you that. Then you do have Illinois. I think this is a team kind of like what Indiana had this year, where you have the veteran quarterback to kind of lead you. I think he's going to get even better than he was last year. The run game is going to be very solid with McCray and Lawfrey, and I think you have guys all around that team that are going to make plays, especially defensively. You have some absolute dudes, including Matthew Bailey, that I think are going to be huge, huge players for that team. Do you think people are overhyping Florida a little bit? Yeah, and actually that's something I'm going to talk about here in a second. They're in my dark horse kind of realm, and it's an interesting team to talk about because I haven't seen too much from them yet. So, and the quarterback position for Bama, it is an issue. As of right this second, it is very much an issue, and the reality is I don't know who that quarterback's going to be, and on top of that, I don't know if that quarterback's going to be all that ready when he steps into that field. So there's a lot of things to think about with Alabama. I trust Kalen DeBoer enough to believe that offense and that quarterback's going to come far enough, but it's definitely still a question because you're basically putting your the hope and dreams of the Alabama season into the hands of a guy that hasn't made a career start. And then you do have Tennessee. I think they're just a team that the defense is going to be too good. Nico has to take another step forward, and they will absolutely at least be in the mix for a CFP. Oh, yes. In terms of the Indiana replacement at quarterback, it is going to be Fernando Mendoza. They brought him in from Cal. Very talented young kid that absolutely could develop into a player, kind of like Curtis Rourke. I think it could take them a little bit more time in 2025 than they might like, but definitely will be an interesting thing to watch, and a guy that really has a ceiling that is off through the roof. NFL scouts love that kid, and definitely will be an interesting thing to watch what he can do with Kurt Cignetti. But into the dark horses, and let's talk about Florida here for a second, because it might not be a dark horse for everyone, but the reality is I got to see them do it. I got to see Florida do it for multiple weeks in a row. What I saw against Ole Miss and LSU puts them in a team that I think can compete for a CFP spot. No doubt about that. They played incredible football. The defense continues to come along, and DJ Lagway is an absolute game changer. Now, the question is, does DJ Lagway continue this path? Because it's much easier said than done. To be able to say, go out there and be even better than you were in your freshman year is not the easiest thing in the world. So they're still a dark horse to me. They're still a team that I very much like, and a team that I very well think can get to a CFP spot. But the reality is, I got to see it. I got to be able to see it multiple weeks in a row where I can trust Billy Napier to go get 10 wins in a season. Because right now, I just can't. And that's what's going to have to happen this next year. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. They play a very tough schedule, so that works against them as well. But overall, very, very good team, and definitely one that I think could be very dangerous in 2025. Louisville's the team that I absolutely love. I think they're just kind of slipping around right now under the radar, but the running back room is as good as you're going to find in the country. Miller Moss coming in, I feel like, is the perfect quarterback for Jeff Brom and definitely is going to be a huge piece and definitely going to be interesting to see what they can do. Anthony, you're absolutely right. The Florida offensive line is the biggest problem with that, and they're going to have to find a way to. They brought in a couple of guys from the portal that I think are going to be good pieces, but you still got to put it together. You still got to put 5 guys together, and it's not the easiest thing in the world by any means. Then you have Bryce Underwood in Michigan. If he hits, they absolutely can make a little bit of a run here. They can do some really special things. I have some worries about their defense, losing Mason Graham, losing Kenneth Grant, losing Will Johnson. But the reality is, I think they'll be more than fine on that side of the ball. They're going to need to take a little bit of a step forward offensively. There's no doubt about that. Bryce Underwood should do that to a certain extent. Can he do that all the way? So I wouldn't necessarily bet on Michigan making it to the CFP, but wouldn't necessarily be surprised either. And then Washington with Damon Williams Jr. Just cannot love this kid enough, if I'm being honest. The talent is out of this world. I think the wide receiver room over at Washington is one of the more underrated units in the entire country, and I think it's a team that could do some really special things in 2025. And then you got A&M. This might be a little bit low for A&M. I know a lot of people loved him. I know J.D. Pickell had them in his top 10, so a lot of people really, really like this team. Again, I just got to see it. You know, you were 7-1 halfway through the year and 5-0 in the SEC, and then you finished 8-5. So how am I supposed to feel confident going into next year? I do think they're going to be more talented. I think Marcel Reed will take that next step forward. But the reality is, until I see it, I can't feel overly confident that they're going to compete for a CFP spot really deep into the season. Now, to be totally fair, they did have a spot in the SEC championship waiting for them if they were able to beat Texas, but that probably shouldn't have been the case. They probably should have been in that game before that game even started because they definitely should have beaten Auburn. They probably should have beaten South Carolina. So that's something that's just more, I just got to see it a little bit more to feel confident in it. And also, the entire Big 12 is in this group, except for a couple of teams I'm going to break down here in a second, but most of the Big 12 is in this group because if you can give me a confident Big 12 pick for a champion, I'm going to call you a liar, respectfully. It's one of those conferences that I don't think we're ever going to get a beat on, at least for the next couple of years. And then the keep your eye on group, the group that I love the most, if I'm being honest, Nebraska. I can't say Nebraska is going to be able to make it to the CFP, but let's just say Dylan Raiola becomes the quarterback that a lot of us thought he was going to be coming out of high school, and he was in different points in the season in his freshman year. What if he takes that big-time leap? And what if Dane Key coming in and Williams Nawari coming in and all of those guys coming in from the portal makes a huge difference? You know, I think they're in a position where the schedule's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. They're going to have to go through some big-time teams, but things click very quickly. Matt Rule has been one to be known that it just takes 1 year for everything to kind of come into order, and then he goes off running. I think it could very well happen for Nebraska this year. Then you got Georgia Tech, another team that I'm not necessarily betting on, but watching very, very closely. What Brent Key does over there is incredible. They are never going to feel like they're out of a game, and then Haynes King leading that offense makes it one of the more efficient groups in the entire country. So I think that's a program that absolutely can make a little bit of a run. The schedule's a nightmare, so that makes it a little bit tougher for them to possibly make a CFP run, but definitely could be a team that you see in headlines all across the year that just they beat someone they weren't supposed to beat, and over and over and over again. And then you do have Baylor, a team that I think Sawyer Robertson is one of the more underappreciated quarterbacks in the entire country. He can do so many different things for you, and he ignited that Baylor team late on in the season where they badly needed it, and Dave Aranda badly needed it. And then you do have Iowa. Iowa with Mark Gronowski is one that I'm maybe one of the teams I'm most excited to see as we get into 2025 because I think they have a lot of different things. They can take advantage of a manageable schedule and have a very nice year in 2025. That's one of Anthony's favorites, I know, so I very well think that they can make a little bit of a run next year. And then Colorado, always a team that you're going to want to buy into, always a team that's going to be really fun. I am a little bit worried about Caden Salter. I think he has all the ability in the world, and I think that run game is going to take a step forward with his ability to run the football, but at the end of the day, can he make the right decisions? Can he not make the mistakes that will put Colorado in a hole is going to be a big-time question, and then if you start Juju Lewis, is he ready for the moment? Is he at a freshman level all the way ready to do all the things he needs to do? I would argue no. I would argue he's not quite there yet. I would argue it has to be Caden Salter. I can't necessarily say I'm overly confident in what Caden Salter can do. Now, I do think he has that top-end talent that could really get Colorado where they need to be, which is why you're going to want to keep an eye on him one way or another. But the reality is, it is a pretty steep drop off from him, from Shedeur Sanders to him, and we'll see how Colorado kind of handles that going into the 2025 season. But let's take our second break here. And when we come back, let's talk about some hot takes. We got some hot takes for the offseason and the season for 2025. Definitely some big time things, including possible NCAA split getting very, very real this offseason. And we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.